Hello, friends, and welcome to the Optimized Advisor Podcast, where we focus on optimizing the well-being and best practices of insurance and financial professionals today. On this show, our objective is to help you optimize your life, optimize your profession, and learn from other optimized advisors. I'm your host, Scott Heinela. We hope you enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Optimized Advisor Podcast. I have the great pleasure and enjoyment of having two guests today in studio. One is my good friend and fellow advisor, Bart Zandbergen.
Hello, Scott.
Welcome. And third episode that we are now doing, for those interested, can tune into episode number 8 and 48. You did that backwards. Welcome to the studio, Dr. Morgan Cutlip.
Great to be here again. Thank you for having me.
All right, so today, sincerely thank you for taking the time. I know that your world and your life is super busy right now. One of the topics that we're going to talk about today is a project you've been embarking on. Saw your episode in the Good Morning America. Yeah, thanks. You did good. That was great. That was
I was so nervous. Oh my gosh.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My point is, I'm sure your life is a whirlwind in good ways and blessed ways.
Absolutely, but I'm happy to be here. I was glad when I got the invite. I'm like, yeah, let's do this.
Okay.
It's always fun coming
I love
in the studio.
We want to talk about a few things. One, the book that you've been embarking on and that journey to get to where this is today, which I'm sure you're very, very happy with.
I am happy with it.
And also talk about the book in itself. And then we also had a couple of questions for you that we might make you a little bit uncomfortable with.
Great, let's do it.
Okay.
That's always fun.
All right, so the book. I think it's an obvious reason to answer the question of why you made a book, especially a book on this topic about women and the motherhood and the challenges that they have, starting with mother yourself like you mother your kids.
Yeah, so you want me to tell you the why?
I would love for you to tell us the why.
How about the why and the how? Like what caused you to say, this is a book I need to write?
So I'll start a little bit further back than you're asking, just so people have a context. So I've worked alongside my dad for over 15 years. We're kind of doing a little bit of our own thing now, but I feel like I grew up in this profession of relationship education. So he has his doctorate in psychology, and he went back to school when I was in grade school, and I started going to classes with him, started going to conferences with him, and when I was in college, I spoke at some marital conferences with him and just kind of grew up in the profession. And I knew that I wanted to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. I couldn't just follow in his footsteps and have no credentials. So I got my degrees and all of the things. And I remember very specifically saying to him, I think it was probably maybe a sophomore in college, and I said, someday I want to do something to help women. I don't know what it looks like, but that's going to be my thing. Like, you have your thing, this is my thing. I think that's always been something that's been important to me. And I didn't know what that was. And then fast forward many, many years later, and our daughter Effie was born, who's 10 now. So this has been a long time in the making. And she just, I think I went into motherhood expecting to be exceptional at it. I had credentials, I have good parents, I was like, this is gonna be easy, bring it on, I'm just made for this. And I was totally caught off guard by things like the loss of freedom that I did not anticipate, by how difficult it would be to juggle my work, by the amount of just guilt and difficulty I'd have leaving my daughter. I felt really bad about that, and just the amount of responsibilities that piled on. And so I felt buried in it. I felt lost. And I knew then, I have this way of I can be lost and also have some rationality to me. So I was like, I'm in it and I'm buried and I'm getting resentful toward my husband for a number of reasons. We had some life stuff going on where he got, we were in Florida for a very quick stint, and he was relocated to California. So from Effie being 2 months to 10 months, we were apart. So that's a pretty critical time in a baby's development where you're going through a lot. And so I was feeling very much on my own too. So that was another factor. But I knew at some point I would come out of this. It's like a fog in the beginning. I knew it would lift. And that's when I decided at some point I'm going to help moms navigate this time in motherhood differently and more empowered with practical tools and information.
That's great.
That is great. The thing I think about that is in that journey that you were dealing with, handling yourself and being a mother, how that impacted your relationship with your husband and all the other facets of your life, and how do I spin all these plates successfully?
Yeah.
Where going into it, it was easy street. Your intent, your thought was, this is going to be easy street.
Well, yeah, and I think that's what set me up, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us I think everybody goes into motherhood, or maybe even just different parts of life with like these almost, in the book I talk about almost having these movie moments in my head that I expected to live out as a mom. But we have these expectations that we take into these experiences, into motherhood, into marriage, into our work life, all of these expectations. And when our reality is very different from our expectations, that space between is really where I think feelings of falling short, feeling like you're failing, all of that stuff really creeps in.
Mm-hmm. I almost laughed out loud when you said you were upset or bitter at your husband. And I thought to myself, isn't that kind of daily for us husbands that we're
Are you the bad guys?
Upset about?
Oh.
It's like the Fall Guys.
Yeah, and gladly.
Well, maybe we should unpack that one.
And you didn't say it directly, but I think that you inferred it. Like, did you have a loss of self, like who you are?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what happens, and it's not like all at once. It's like bit by bit. I mean, part of it was, I thought I'd be good at this, and I'm not good at this, or at least it didn't feel like I was. I thought that I would look a certain way in motherhood, that I'd have a certain amount of energy, that I would just be having a certain amount of patience, like all of these things that I would have said are part of who I am, and I felt like I wasn't living up to those things. And so I think that's part of how we have a loss of self is feeling so discrepant from the person we thought we'd be.
Yeah.
So how did you lift the fog? It cannot be that easy.
No, it's not that easy.
Well, and it's interesting because it's like I'm the center of my life and my world. And yes, when I'm married and a husband, well, that's still pretty easy because we're still independent in our lives and we are together as a couple. But when you had Effie, it's like that. Now I put myself second or even third.
Yeah.
How do I regain that balance?
I mean,
what are the steps that you take to even start to rebuild that?
Yeah, I mean, it took me a long time, honestly. It took me another kid, so then Roy was born. So
let's just add fuel to the fire.
Yeah, you just kind of kept piling it on. We got to get to ground zero. I think, there were these different moments that I just remember being like, what am I doing? This isn't working. One, my husband, he doesn't love this story, but it's a true story, and I'm not elaborating, and he can take it up with me later. But I think the kids were, so Roy had to be 2, so Effie was probably 4, and I was just at my wit's end. I was like, I cannot do this. I cannot do this. I need a break. I need some space. I can't breathe. I don't know if you guys experience this with kids. I actually don't even know if you have kids, but
3
kids. Okay. Yeah. So something that got to me was the sensory overload that I experienced. That was new. That was a new thing. So that can feel really oppressive, I think, sometimes. And so said to Chad, take him out of the house. So, and I think this is one of the first times I really actually kind of demanded something like that. And so we did. And he took him to the community pool. And I was like, I'll meet you there in a little bit. I took maybe an hour. I probably just sat and stared at a wall. I don't know what I did. And I finally met him there, and the kids are losing their minds. And they're freaking out. And luckily, he ran into some friends of ours. But he didn't bring a change of clothes. He brought sunscreen. That's the only thing. And maybe towels. But I'm not convinced he brought towels. But no snacks, no water, no change of clothes. And these are little kids. They're just like, I don't want to be uncomfortable. And I was like, I walked up, and it was funny, and we all joked about it. It wasn't a big deal. I'm not somebody who's like, what's your problem type of person.
Right.
But also I thought to myself, what is my problem that we are this far into parenting and he didn't know what to pack for the kids, because I have been doing it all myself. And so I think a lot of women would have been mad at their husbands, and I wasn't stoked about it, but it was a nice point of reflection for me to say, how am I participating in our dynamic where I'm doing it all? And it wasn't just about me doing it all with him, but just doing it all in general. I had made my needs so small that I had to start to rediscover what they were, what I needed, what would help me feel better, and to assert those things. And so you asked me for steps. I think I'm a bigger picture thinker than just like 1, 2, 3. It's not like a prescription, but part of what I had to do was pay attention to my relationship with myself and manage it much like I manage my relationship with my kids and my husband. And so part of that was getting to know myself again. Part of that was getting over my hang-ups. What's getting in the way of me being able to assert myself and my needs in my relationships? And so I had to challenge some of that stuff. And I think this applies to lots of areas of life, but I had to start behaving differently before I felt ready. I felt a lot of guilt around leaving the kids, but I needed some time. And so before I felt totally resolved in that, I started asking for it. And behavior and feelings kind of feed each other. And so bit by bit, I made my way back and changed some dynamics in our relationship too, for the better.
You know, it's interesting because Bart, a lot of what you practice and I would say instill in others is answering the question or defining what is true wealth.
Right.
And it begins with health and wellness and finding proper mental state of mind. And you were putting yourself in the back seat and you have to begin by recognizing I'm no good to anybody if I'm in this state of mind and well-being. I've got to fix that first before I'm going to be a mother, be a husband, wife, what have you, successfully operate a business. It does run through every fabric of your life.
I'm just wondering, I mean, you are a trained, educated professional in this area. And so you were able to discover that within yourself. Maybe the answer to this question is going to be read the book, but how are other moms and dads who go through the same thing, how do they figure it out?
Yeah, so read the book. No, I give a little bit more. So the main kind of thesis of my book is mother yourself like you mother your kids. But you could, it doesn't quite work as well for dads, but it could work for dads. But the idea is that we already, and I'm speaking about women, but I think this really, like the concepts actually apply across the board. But we are really good at being the master managers of all of the people and all the things. We kind of are keeping things running. Research says that women are usually the ones who even touch base with their partners. Like, I think we need a date. I know it might look different in your relationship, I think, but and that's great. I think that's a great thing. But can we talk about something? We're the ones who usually do these things, but we don't.
You're the glue. You're the glue that holds the pieces together.
A lot of times, not always, but a lot of times. And so we have to learn how to take those same skill sets that we already possess. It's not learning necessarily anything new, and turn it toward ourselves. And part of that is doing these check-ins with ourselves. So in the book, I give, because it's like, okay, if you're going to manage your relationship with yourself, what are you actually managing? And I think that's what's somewhat different about my book than other books you might find on this topic, which is I give a model of relationships. So it's a visual model of 5 areas that make up every single relationship, including your relationship with yourself. And I walk moms through how do you do a check-in in each of these 5 areas, and how do you also do a quick assessment. And because it's a visual, it's really nice because you can easily conjure it up in your mind and put it to use in the moment. So go to the bathroom, do your self check-in. Where are my deficits? What do I need? And how can I either quickly turn the dials and make some adjustments, or how can I at least define my experience and be like, I don't have time to figure this out now. I don't have time to take care of this now, but I can put a pin in it for later. And definition hits the release valve in and of itself. Because sometimes we're just sitting in our yuck and we don't know even our way out. But when you have the definition, that's like, at least I have a plan that I can put into practice later.
Yeah. Is this something, or are you encouraging, is this hours a day or is it a couple? You said go to the bathroom, so I'm assuming that's minutes.
Yeah, it's minutes.
Is this minutes a day of this visualization or
I
self-check-in?
think it's like minutes or seconds. I think you can quickly kind of tick through the 5 areas and think about, okay, what's going on with me. It works like
That's just a validation of how quick women think.
No, you can do it too. Men love it. So this.
I'm in there 10 minutes.
You're on your phone in the bathroom, probably.
That's true.
Well, okay. So the model is called the relationship attachment model. It's the foundation of all of our courses. So even our couples courses, but our stuff's used in the military, and men love this model because it actually looks like an equalizer on a stereo.
It does.
So you have 5 sliders, and so you can just imagine moving them up and down. How am I doing in this area? How am I doing in that area? And you can quickly see when some are low and some are high, this is where I can get the most bang for my buck, make an adjustment here, and the others will start to follow up with it. I don't know, am I making sense? It's hard because I see it so clearly in my mind, but
it's amazing.
It's very simple. If you're making a PB&J, you can quickly think through the areas. If you're going to the bathroom, when you're taking a shower, moments that you actually are likely alone, those are good times to do it.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense, just learning that and getting into that habit.
It applies to your marriage too. So if you think about doing a quick assessment of your relationship, how are we doing in these 5 areas? You can then quickly say, okay, this is where we're having a little bit of a vulnerability. Let's adjust, because if you leave these things as vulnerabilities over time, that's when relationships can start to deteriorate.
Right. I've seen it time and time again where mom is so focused on being a mom that maybe she's not quite the wife anymore.
Yeah. I think that's really common. It doesn't get a lot of play on like social media, things like that.
No memes or anything.
That perspective, because I think it's heavily like women's voices.
Yeah.
But I think that's a huge part of what starts to happen in relationships after kids, is that moms a lot of times throw themselves into either the needs of their kids and their partner, or just the needs of the kids.
Yeah.
And so they make theirs really small. But what ends up ultimately happening is they burn out, and they start to become like grumpy and irritable and bitter and resentful. And then that affects their sex life. And then it affects all of these other things in their relationship. And before you know it, it's like, I don't even know how we got here, but we're not in a good place.
Yeah. And I'm not the professional that you are, but I had a thought about just that a mom who is so focused on kid or children, I think needs to realize that there is a day when the children are gone. Right? Mm-hmm. Maybe 18, maybe 28, but they're gone. And then my thought is she still going to know, or he, whatever, is that person going to know who their spouse is? Have you spent enough time? Are they still compatible? Are they still... Because the spouse stays, for the most part. For the most part.
Well, I think, like you can look at this different ways. I totally agree with you, and that's in our couples content. That's what we talk about a lot, is like, if you don't maintain your closeness throughout the years, you're going to either have this massive blowout that occurs in your relationship, or you just have these like slow leaks over time, and the kids leave, and you're like,
who are you?
I don't even love you anymore. Like we've just stayed together for the kids. We kind of like look back and try to make meaning of what we've been doing all those years. And like, I guess we stay together for the kids. But the same thing happens even for moms as individuals, is that kind of like a prototype is a mom whose kids finally leave the nest, and she's been all about the kids all her life, and now she doesn't even know who she is anymore. And then sometimes what happens, which is unfortunate, is she kind of gets resentful when her kids have a life of their own.
Oh, sure.
Or it's like, going out with your friends again. Like those snarky comments. And it's like, well, you didn't nurture your relationship likely with your partner or yourself all of these years, and now you're bitter and grumpy, and who wants to feel like that? Nobody likes themselves that way. Yeah.
And it's all in love, in their act of love.
Yes,
they don't even realize
that's the crazy part.
That's the crazy part of it.
Yeah. Yep. Sacrificing for the sake of our relationships, only to sacrifice our relationships.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the book, one of the major sections within the book that you provide insight into is to 5 steps for transformation. Can you touch very, very high level on a couple of those and maybe an example?
Yeah, so I talked about the model of relationships, and so each step goes with each area of the model. So I'll run through them, and then I'll go into one or two. So it's know deeply, trust accurately, rely boldly, commit wisely, and touch purposefully. And so know deeply, we'll talk about that one real quickly. The idea behind that is that for you to actually meet your needs and to know what you need, you have to really know who you are. And I think for moms, we tend to kind of lose touch with who we are when we become moms, or we act in ways that we're like unrecognizable to ourselves. And so it's about figuring out ways to come back more into alignment, as well as discovering who you are so you can really care for yourself deeply. And through the book, in that main section, every single point is first articulated through a story about my kids. And so I'm applying the point to how we care for our kids, because I think for moms it's a lot more digestible that way. So we're like, whatever, ourselves, but it's like, here's how we do it with our kids, and then okay, what does that look like when we turn it toward ourselves? And so the story I tell for that chapter is actually about our son when he was in preschool, and it starts out with me getting a phone call. I'm working that day. I get a phone call from the administrator of the school, and she's like, "Roy hit a kid. You need to get up here right now." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is gonna get weird." So I live really close to school. I hopped in the car and drove up and sat down, and those horribly itchy chairs, and I'm sitting there faced with the administrator and his teacher, and they're like, Roy hit a kid with a block. Which I was like, oh, you didn't tell me that. It's like next level. Yeah. And he's a sweet boy. Like, he's a sweet kid. He's not a violent kid. So this is really surprising. So I start getting lectured, which is like, you need to talk with him about how to articulate his feelings. I feel like they're like, I have a personal bias that I think that schools are a little bit prejudicial toward boys, but that's maybe for another discussion. But they're like, you need to talk to him about how to express his feelings properly. And by the way, he's, I don't even know if these things will make sense, but like, he's only doing parallel play, which means he's just kind of playing on his own. And we think that's developmentally behind. And our son, he likes to, not as much anymore, which is sad, but he liked to dress up a lot in costumes. So for like the first whole year, he came as the Greatest Showman. Like he had a red amazing. Like circus coat and a top hat. But this year was superheroes, and so they were like, I don't know what you're showing him at home and what violence you're watching in the home, but we know he likes superheroes. So I was just like sitting there,
so taken back,
totally taken back, but
Hello,
also
homeschool.
right. I was also trying to figure out, do I tell them hey, I'm a doctorate in psychology. Like, I know about talking about feelings, but then I was like, or does that make me look really bad? Because I'm got this kid who just hit a kid with a block. And so I let them do their thing. And the administrator knew me a bit better than the teacher. But I finally said, okay, let me share some things on my side. And I go, have you, this is how Roy talks about school. He talks about school, he's a crazy storyteller. I can never figure out fact from fiction, but they're really colorful stories. They're pretty fun, but I can pick up on themes.
Right.
And so the themes of his stories are that he doesn't feel safe at school. He talks about being chased. He'll be like, oh, so-and-so, locked me in a room. And I'm like, that didn't happen probably. Or like, hit me on the head. And it's like, okay, you don't have any marks. But, I'm like constantly trying to decipher what's what. But the reality is he doesn't feel safe and he feels really anxious. And a lot of times anxiety will come out as anger. And I go, so that's one thing I want you to know. The second thing is that I want to ask you is, have you ever noticed Roy curling up in the fetal position at school? I have pictures of him doing this from when he was a little boy. But I'm talking 12 months, and the teacher's like, oh yeah, he does that a lot. Maybe you would want to mention, I don't know, that's not normal behavior in my opinion. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, that's what he does when he's feeling kind of overwhelmed. He gets in a little ball. So he's trying to regulate. So he's not feeling safe. He's clearly trying to hide away. Yeah. Something worth mentioning. And let's talk about the morning with the block. So
show me that block.
yeah. Let me see that. And so I go, I think I know who he hit. I know you can't tell me. And I go, but I always stick around in the mornings until he feels comfortable. He was just a nervous kid at school. And so I would hang out, we'd build stuff. Usually we built towers. That day we built a tower like as tall as him. It's like this big. And there's this boy who kept like hovering around the tower and threatening to not get down. I asked him not to. And I go, did he knock it down when I left? And they're like, well, yeah. And I go, so he knocked it down and then he hit him. And he's like, yeah. They're like, yeah. I go, he didn't tell me that part. But not okay. Definitely not okay. We're going to talk about this. Roy and I will absolutely talk about these things. But I think you need to understand the bigger picture of who he is.
Right.
Because he's nervous. He's anxious. He's not feeling safe. This kid was threatening him that morning. We asked him politely multiple times to leave us alone. He didn't. And he's trying to ball up and not act out on his feelings of anxiety at school. And you're not picking up on it. And I think you see him as a bad kid. So the administrator, the teacher was a little different, but the administrator was like, I get it. I have an idea. Let's move Roy into another classroom. So this classroom has 8 kids. I think it'll be better. So we move him to another classroom. I touch base with her in a week and a half, and she's like, oh my gosh, Roy won't stop talking to me. He tells me the craziest stories. I can't believe how amazing his vocabulary is, and he is a totally new kid. And I write in the book, he wasn't a totally new kid. He was the same kid. But he was actually, for the first time by his teachers, known well, known deeply, understood. And when they understood him, they could meet his needs better. And that's part of what we have to do as individuals, is that we have to know ourselves well enough to know how we can care for ourselves in ways that actually move the needle. And thank goodness I knew Roy deeply enough to know, the full picture of what was going on with him.
It's a great story.
It is a great story. I wish it was easier said than done to know yourself deeply.
I do get very practical in the book. Walk you through ways to do that and actual touch points for how you can check in.
Read the darn book, people. The last thing I want to touch base on was your journey in writing this book. I'm always fascinated by people like yourself who take it upon themselves to say, I'm going to author this book and I'm going to take this project on. And I can imagine at times it's overwhelming. It's also very, very prideful and exciting and fearful and all of those things. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah. So
where you're at today with this?
I started the book, I don't even know, maybe 7 years ago. I would just kind of go away to the library here and there on the weekends and maybe, type a few paragraphs or something. And eventually, a couple years ago, so we were at the tail end of COVID, I think, when I decided, or I was talking to my husband, and I'm like, all I just want to do is write my stinking book. I keep waiting for things to get less busy. I keep waiting for the schedule to clear, my work projects to be done so I can put time into this. And it's never going to happen. I'm finally, I see the light. It's never going to happen. And so if I don't do it now, I don't think I'm ever going to do it. So I need to do it now. And he's like, do it. I'm like, oh, well, if it
and
happens,
you like, don't tell me what to do?
No.
Okay, good.
Oh, I'm always like, tell me what to do. Don't make me think. Just tell me what. He's a super decisive guy. I love that about him. It's like, yes. Okay. So we had to
go write the book. I support you.
Yeah,
right?
And that's what we had to talk about, though. Because if this actually happens, that means that he has a very busy job. That means that you're going to, it's going to require more. And so are you okay with that? It's going to require sacrifice. Are you okay with that? So he said, yeah. I reached out. My dad wrote a book in the past, so I reached out to his agent. Some other people I knew had written books, reached out to their agents, and sent over my really crappy proposal. So that's what you need really to sell a book is a proposal.
A crappy one, or
mine was crappy. Luckily,
luckily
my agent saw through it, and I think she saw maybe I could speak clearly on things, or she could see some of my video content. Okay, she's got something there that we can work with this woman. So we did some interviews, and we ended up crafting a proposal. It took probably 3 months. I don't know how much detail you want. I can share after the show, but proposals a couple chapters, chapter summaries, an intro, table of contents, stuff like that. And then we pitched it. So she pitched it. I didn't pitch it. She pitched it to a bunch of publishers, and then you start doing interviews. And I think I ended up with, 6 or 7 offers. And the interview process was fun. I thought they were interviewing me, but kind of at that point you're interviewing them, which is much of a nice position to be in.
Yeah.
Then they give you your offers and you negotiate. And from that point on, it's basically like, here's your deadline, get your book done.
Wow.
And so that was my process. It goes back to something I said when we first started, which sometimes you got to act before you feel ready. And that was a big part of my story. And yeah, now I'm launching it, which is a totally different ball game. I feel like I've had to wear a lot of hats. I designed my cover. I wasn't like we couldn't agree on a cover, so I ended up doing my own. And
wow,
there's just a lot of things where I did not anticipate.
Good for you. This is your baby.
This is my baby.
Yeah.
That I didn't anticipate, but the launching process is wild because pre-orders matter a lot in today's day and age of book selling. And I don't know if you know this, but they all accumulate on the day that your book comes out. So you have this pre-order period to sell these books, and then they all add up. And so if you can do a good job in the pre-order, you have a higher chance of making like a bestsellers list or something.
Wow, it's a whole
nother ball game.
process, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so that's why there's you're giving stuff away to buy your book, and I'm like, yeah, because you you want to incentivize, buy it now, because it's hard to spend your money before you actually get something in return. And so, yeah, so now I'm just hustling, buy my book, and trying to provide a lot of value. So
how do people do that? Where do they go? How do they reach out to you if they haven't already? Yeah. And where do they go to get this beautiful book?
Thank you. So you can buy it anywhere you buy books, Amazon, Target, Barnes / Noble, anywhere like that. Through my website, which is Dr. Morgan Cutlip, so it's Dr. Morgan Cutlip, all one word, /book. You can find all the links to the retailers and then how you can actually opt in to get my gifts if you pre-order. So those are going on September 19th, so do it now.
Okay.
All right, Dr. Morgan, so I always have the honor of asking my guests one final thought question.
Okay, always make me the most.
You ready?
Ready?
What is your ultimate lesson learned in your career as a therapist and or writing this book?
So I can speak to writing the book. I hired a book marketing coach to help me kind of just get a bit organized. And along the way, I was getting some pushback from my publisher on some things, and they're great. They've been wonderful, but just I think I'm pushing them a little bit. I'm like, What about this? What about that? And they're like, hold the phone. Slow down, lady. You're a first-time author.
Slow your roll.
Yeah. And I remember they were suggesting one thing, and I wanted to do something different. And I called the book marketing guy, and he's like, he doesn't have kids. He's not in my niche at all, but he's just marketing mind. And he's like, oh my gosh. He's like, you are in the driver's seat. Drive the bus. This is your show. You are in charge. And I think that is a lesson that it applies actually to lots of domains of life.
Yeah, of course.
Which is that in this process, I've really had to step out of my comfort zone of just being agreeable and instead being like, I like that, but I'm going to do this instead, or I'd rather do this, and to really drive the bus. I think in our relationships, we have to learn how to drive the bus, and that means many things, whether it's managing our relationship or taking control of what we can control, how we show up in our relationships, how we communicate, how we assert ourselves, how, all these things that we are really in charge of. So that's a lesson that I'm regularly just kind of tapping back into and putting to work in my life.
I love that. That's
great.
very well said.
Yep. Drive the bus.
Drive the bus.
Drive the bus. Can I say hell yeah? Drive your own bus.
Yeah. Great takeaway.
Very good. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Good to see you, Bart.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for being part of this wonderful show. Thank you, Dr. Morgan.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
First time in our new studio.
It's beautiful.
So excited. All right. Well, I'd like to thank everyone who has tuned in, and we look forward to being back in the studio again next week. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Please subscribe, like, share, leave a comment or review. Be sure to check us out on social media at Optimized Advisor Podcast. Till next time.